And we want to warn you, some of the details you're going to hear may be disturbing.
Special thanks to Dave G. for bringing this case to my attention so I can get it out here to you all. That I believe these monsters should be made famous, and their victims deserve a voice as far as we can give them one. Please listen to Baby Willow's story that is going to be given to you by Sheriff Judd in Polk County, Florida. At this point in the case, I could not find no photos of the mother. I could not even find the mother's name. I did look for a Facebook on Jacob, this piece of trash you're looking at here besides Sheriff Judd, but I couldn't even find a Facebook or a Twitter or any kind of social media on this piece of garbage. But here you will hear Sheriff Judd tell you about 4-month-old baby Willow and how her story ended. Rest in peace, Willow.
The helicopter was dispatched, the medical helicopter was dispatched, and the child was stabilized briefly and then placed on the helicopter and flown to St. Joseph's Hospital in Tempe.
We learned some horrific details about what happened to his daughter, and it is tough to hear.
His 4-month-old daughter was found with broken ribs, a skull fracture, and her brain was hemorrhaging from blunt force trauma. Detectives say it was all at the hands of this man, Jacob Kubai.
I want to introduce you to a murderer, to someone who viciously murdered his beautiful 4-year-old baby girl that they referred to as Strawberry. Now, it appears to me that normal society can't understand this kind of person. Well, I can tell you from a great deal of experience that a lifelong law enforcement officer can't understand this kind of person either. But here he is, Jacob Kubai. He's 22 years of age. He and his wife had this baby just 4 months ago. And on February the 22nd in the evening, Jacob Strawberry took mom to work. They dropped her off at the Texas Cattle Company in Lakeland at about 5 minutes to 5 in the afternoon. And then he went home with the baby. I might also add that mom works also at Buffalo Wild Wings. So she's working 2 jobs and Jacob's staying home with a baby. So he arrives at home and he then at about 20 minutes to, I guess it's about 20 minutes to 6 when he gets back home, he plays video games for a while. He discovers while he's fixing dinner that he doesn't have any chicken broth for the food. So he said he took the baby Strawberry and went to Walmart. He told us this. Now, we pull the video at Walmart. He has no baby. And then we watch him shop, and then he comes through the line to self-checkout with no baby. Then he goes home at about 6:54. So he's at Walmart less than 10 minutes. He said at 7:50 in the evening, about 7:50, he fed the baby and checked on her every 10 minutes. We thought that was a little strange. At 7:50, fed the baby, checked on her. At 8 o'clock, checked on her. At 8:10 p.m., he checked on her and found the baby unresponsive. He said he tried CPR. Investigation shows that he gave 5 compressions. He saw that the baby still was unresponsive, so he grabbed the baby up and drove to Bartow Regional, where the Bartow Police Department was notified. As the chief said, then they flew the baby to St. Joe, and here's what they discovered at autopsy, and they discovered many of these injuries as well. They discovered that night that the baby had a skull fracture. that the child had multiple impact bruises to the forehead, that the baby had 10 ribs fractured, that she had a hemorrhage in her spine, that she had multiple layers of brain bleed. Still, the baby fought for life and lived 2 more days before she died. Then an autopsy was completed. And at autopsy, it gave the details. Our detectives said they counted a minimum of 10 strikes to the forehead. Did you hear that? The baby was beaten in the forehead at least by 10 different strikes. 10 ribs were fractured, and they said would have been from a squeezing of the child. In addition to that, this significant skull fracture to the back of the head, the medical examiner said it would have occurred by striking a hard object. The baby was literally beaten to death. And the only person that was home with the baby at the time was Jacob. We interviewed Mom, and Mom said the baby had no bruising when she went to work. The baby was not complaining or restless as an infant would be that had significant injuries. It leaves only him. So our detectives, who are simply the very best on our homicide team, try to talk to him. And first he's totally lucid, goes, I don't know what you're talking about. We put him in a cell, told him he was going to be charged eventually with aggravated manslaughter, child abuse, aggravated child abuse. And then when we took him out of the interview room because he wanted to talk to us some more, he started saying things like, none of this is real. My wife's not real. My baby's not real. This is a fantasy. It just didn't happen. He began immediately playing games with us. He showed zero remorse. He shed not one tear, and yet he is literally beaten and squeezed his baby to death at 4 months old. No remorse, no emotion, nothing. Mother responded appropriately when she heard of this injury to her child and couldn't understand how it happened. The case is still under investigation. He's locked up in the county jail, and occasionally you really see people that, based upon the investigation of the death of the injury, you wonder why God allows them to breathe air. Here's one that I wonder why God allows him to breathe air. After you see the investigation and what this baby was exposed to before she died. Any questions? That is still under investigation. We don't see any previous complaints to DCF, and obviously we've been dealing with the instant injuries and the instant death, and we will follow up with that as before this investigation is completed to see if there's any older injuries. But you know, how much older can injuries be? The baby's only 4 months old. So there's more work to do, more investigation to do. But at this point in the investigation, and we never say never, as you know, we have no investigative information that would lead us to believe mother participated in this or knew about it. And certainly if the baby's healthy when she goes to work and then she's called that the baby's at the hospital unresponsive, she's got as many questions as you would expect a mother to when she said, I just saw this baby just a couple hours ago when I came to work. So while she's working and trying to make ends meet, this sorry human being is home beating the child.
Do we know the time frame of when he was done?
The best interpretation of the timeline that the detectives see, they think it was before he went to Walmart. But we've not completed the investigation yet. Our supposition is it was before he went to Walmart. No previous mental issues, and he was totally lucid and rational until he found out what kind of trouble he was in, and then he didn't remember anything. Life has become a blank. No criminal history. Certainly when you see these injuries, and this baby's 4 months old, you know that a baby 4 months old is not mobile. So when you see 10 separate sets of bruising across the forehead, you see a fracture across the back of the head, and the medical examiner said it calls from hitting a hard object. When you see 10 ribs are broken, that's from either squeezing or beating them in the ribs. When you see that the child had a hemorrhage in the spinal column, that's just all indicative of a horrific beating. We all seek answers for this. We all think there's got to be an answer. There's got to be an answer. It's got to be a mistake, because nobody could beat a 4-month-old beautiful little girl to death. He can, and he did. Okay? Thank you.
That the baby was left alone at least one other time in January.
22-year-old Jacob Kubai appeared in court today for aggravated child abuse and manslaughter charges. Investigators say the baby was taken to the hospital last month for injuries. Kubai took care of her while the mom was working. Investigators say he left the baby at home when he went to the store. He claimed the baby was fine when he came home and fed her, but he later found her not breathing.
A Bartow man has been denied bond after the Polk County Sheriff's Office says he beat his 4-month-old baby girl to death. A death that the Sheriff's Office says is hard to imagine. A shock to the community.
It's inexcusable. As far as I'm concerned, it's horrific.
As a Bartow man, Jacob Kubai is now behind bars with the Sheriff's Office, saying he's responsible for the death of his infant daughter, Willow, whose nickname was Strawberry. He and Strawberry dropped his wife off at work, and he went home and then took her to Walmart. Sheriff says Kubai said he fed the baby and went to check on her and she wasn't responsive. But once the baby arrived to the hospital, a different version of events was shown. This is still under investigation, but Sheriff Judd says there have been no previous records with the Department of Children and Families, and that the mother was at work when all of this happened. Sheriff Judd says before this, Kubai has had no criminal history.
Say that Jacob Kubai was arrested on Tuesday after his daughter was taken to the hospital late last month with no brain activity and suspicious injuries. An autopsy determined that she died from blunt force trauma to the head, but investigators say neither Kubai nor his wife could explain how she was hurt. Deputies say that Kubai told them he took his baby to a store earlier that same day, but investigators say this surveillance video shows him there without her. Deputies say that Kubai was the baby's sole caregiver for 3 hours before she was taken to the hospital. He faces charges including manslaughter of a child.